Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
It wasn't pretty, but the Eagles beat the Saints and reminded everyone they are still one of the top NFC teams. Also, it really seems like the Vikings are too, and the Niners collapsed. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Through 2 weeks, the New Orleans Saints were flying high 2-0, and then in week 3, it turns out, fly Eagles fly. 15-12. The Eagles come back in a barn burner. Okay, no, it wasn't, but it was a fun finish in this one. Gino Camilleri from Locked On Eagles joins me now, and Gino, this was a game that the Eagles at the end, they get a 60-yarder, a 61-yarder, let's not shortchange Dallas Goedert, to set up the game-winning touchdown here. And the defense did enough against the best offense we've ever seen in the first 2 weeks. Like, seriously, they were incredible the first 2 weeks. What defensively, let's start there, were they able to do against this New Orleans Saints team that has just been absolutely on 100 the first 2 weeks?
Vic Fangio, first and foremost, put together one of the most impressive game plans I've seen from a defensive perspective in quite some time here in Philadelphia. And what they did was right all of their wrongs. They were poor setting the edge against the run, allowing big explosive plays to get to the outside. On the interior, guys like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis were not playing up to their potential. They were allowing too many explosive plays on the back end in the air. And the game plan for the Saints, I think everybody knew what it was. They laid it out the first 2 weeks. We're going to run the ball. We're going to put you in second and third and short situations, and we're going to convert all of those situations and score a whole bunch of points, which they did the first 2 weeks. They did that on the first drive, where they ended up getting 3 points. They converted all of their third downs, but then the Eagles just locked in. Jalen Carter had an absolutely dominant day. If you look at the box score, it's not going to show much outside of 2 huge pass deflections, but he was explosive off the ball. Him and Jordan Davis were working in unison. They were finally setting a hard edge to keep these runs inside and keep them from bouncing outside. Quinyon Mitchell looks like a potential defensive rookie of the year with the way he's been playing the last couple weeks. Darius Slay looks rejuvenated back there. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, revenge game. Everything came to fruition for the defense. They got a turnover when it mattered, and all of a sudden, Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean are a pretty formidable linebacker duo, and they got a steal in Zach Bond, man. 13 tackles again today. Somebody that was more of a pure edge rusher when he was in New Orleans. But Fangio used,
remind me where he started his career again. Exactly.
Yeah, he was in New Orleans. He was a draft pick by them. And the thing with him that Vic Fangio really put on display today is having that type of, I'm not saying he is Fred Warner, but having that type of player that really makes a quarterback guess, hey, are they going to bring a blitz? Is this guy going to loop off the edge? Is he going to drop back into coverage? So you really have to account for him every single play. It was clear that in obvious passing downs today, Derek Carr, under a little bit of pressure, forced things a little bit because he had to make a decision maybe a split second earlier. Everything meshed today. It was beautiful. The first, second, and third level, it was great. They stopped the explosive plays. Rashid Shaheed did not get any downfield receptions today, which was incredible. I was expecting at least one long play from the Saints, but it really came on the back of the defense this week. They did an incredible job, and the offense, they did just enough in spite of their head coach.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because a pair of fourth down non-conversions here for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I saw some of your tweets. I know Eagles Twitter was, and just NFL Twitter was perplexed with some of the decision-making here from Nick Sirianni. And in a win, look, it wouldn't be an Eagles game if Philly fans weren't sort of like, yeah, but this other thing sucks. We got to talk about this other thing.
It's the outcome bias in it all, though.
Yeah.
If you're going to look at a win, you have to look at the entire 60 minutes and look at the 60 minutes last week. 2 minutes made them fall short and they blew that game. And they played in spite of Nick Sirianni all day long because, like you said, the first 4th down decision, it was actually the second. They ended up getting the first 4th down. They go for it and end up getting this situation where you're in the red zone with about 16 seconds left. Are you going to go for it on 4th down or on 3rd down, 4th down, try and pick up this 1st down, potentially get one shot at the end zone? Or are you going to kick a field goal? No, they go for it on what is like a counter option out of the tush push. And it just was not the right call. It was a 8.1 win probability increase if they were to have kicked the field goal in that situation. So looking at that in a nutshell is basically saying, if you're the CEO head coach and you're the guy that is continually saying, I study the NFL, I look at all of these situations, times when a team kicks to go up 6 when they shouldn't be kicking to go from a 1-score game to a 1-score game. I know in your neck of the woods, that's a very sore subject. And Nick Sirianni can't say he's looking around the NFL and looking at these situations and then going and put Jake Elliott in his first situation of the game to kick a field goal 60 yards deep when that also was the wrong call as well. It just makes no sense, no rhyme or reason. Your coach's responsibility is to put your players in the best position to succeed week in and week out. Vic Fangio on the defensive side of the ball held himself accountable after what that defense did last week, and so did those players, and they responded.
Yeah.
Nick Sirianni has to do the same. He has to look in the mirror and say, I have to dial it in, because even Kellen Moore, I thought he called a pretty good game. And you and I were talking before this little segment here. If you look at the numbers, it's like Jalen Hurts put together a pretty impressive performance. His completion percentage over expected is second in the week, and he's completing nearly 75% of his passes. And outside of that one interception, he puts together a good game. But where it matters, when you're taking silly penalties by having 12 guys in the huddle late in the game, when you're trying to work the clock down, and these situational penalties and not knowing what analytically is the right decision. I continue to say he's the guy at the blackjack table that the book is telling him to stay. But he split those 10s. All of a sudden, he gets some bad cards. The dealer gets blackjack, and everybody at the table, they lose money. And this is the NFL. You can literally lose jobs because of those decisions. And seeing the guys lock in and play for each other, that's what you got to be most proud of after this week, because we've seen a team in the Philadelphia Eagles go down to the Dome back in the year 2018 and get the doors blown off of them.
I remember.
In what was absolutely a performance where you're saying, yeah, this is rock bottom. This team really did let it all go. But these guys, they showed fight. That defense showed fight. Even Jalen Hurts, he got that offense down the field without contextually. These were the guys that they did not have on that game-winning drive. They were missing their starting right guard, starting right tackle, Lane Johnson, by the way, who, if you look up his statistics with and without him in the lineup, they're bad. A.J. Brown didn't start the game. Devontae Smith gets taken out of the game on a horrific cheap shot. You have a rotational player in Britton Covey who also is out of the game. And they relied on the 2 guys that they had left, all chips against them. It was next man up. Those guys on the right side of the line stepped up. Shout out Fred Johnson and Tyler Steen. Those rotational players, Paris Campbell, Johnny Wilson, they all made plays. But, man, the reason you pay Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley is to do exactly what they did on that last drive. You have to think players and not plays when the game is on the line. That's exactly what they did. This is a week-to-week league, man. It is as evident as ever. You just look around what is going on. I mean, Malik Willis putting on a show for your Packers, and then the Niners drop 2 games all of the sudden, and the Cowboys are getting blown out at home. This is a week-to-week league. You have to sneak in some of these victories. You lost one in a similar manner last week. Sometimes it's only the flip of a coin in this league.
Stay up to date on the Philadelphia Eagles all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Eagles on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Vikings are beginning to look convincing. Before we get to that, the Chiefs look to stay undefeated in Atlanta. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I'm talking, of course, of the NFL season. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I noticed this on Sunday. I went to put in I had a couple same game parlays. I had some straight up, some money line bets, some against the spread bets. And all of a sudden I see these new windows. Oh, hey, I can see what's happening in real time. I can place bets in real time. And right now at FanDuel, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. If you want to place that first $5 bet on some week 4 action, early week 4 action, the look ahead line, Packers 3-point favorites. Maybe Jordan Love plays, maybe he doesn't, against the Minnesota Vikings in what is suddenly a pretty juicy matchup. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Falcons stood in the way of the Chiefs going 3-0, but not for long.
Well, this was, I mean, you're right. I mean, this was a very ugly win, and a win's a win. And what to me, I think was, a couple of struggling points. I mean, one, obviously, if you're a Patrick Mahomes offense and you're averaging 4.8 yards a play, that's anemic. So you want to be a little better than that. But I really got the sense that a lot of times with the run, it was, there were two types of run tonight. I mean, one was they were running specifically either just to set up the pass, or they were running just to basically try and get a 1 yard or 3 yards or whatever it may be at the time. And, once again, we saw one of those drives bogged down inside the red zone. They've got a first and goal at the 3-yard line and get in despite the fact trying to roll 3 straight times. That's a problem. I mean, this team right now can't get just a couple of yards on the ground when it wants to and need to.
The Ravens won, but it wasn't pretty, as the Cowboys made it a game in the 4th because the Ravens, they can't do anything the easy way.
Ravens get their first win of 2024, although it certainly was not the prettiest we've ever seen, at least not for a full 4 quarters. And guess what? If you didn't know, that's how long these games are. They're 4 quarters, but the Ravens only played 3 of them. Yet again, Baltimore outscored 19-0 in the 4th quarter. It's this thing where I would have loved to have talked about it in the way that, look, they dominated on the ground, Baltimore did. They found their identity. They were slinging the ball around. Baltimore's defense was turning up the pressure. But then it all just came crumbling down in the 4th quarter.
And the Lions got back to the style of football they want to play in a win over the Cardinals.
They got back to running the football today. We could talk about so many things, the 10 penalties and the mistakes, and Terrion Arnold with another pass interference call, and Jared Goff throws a bad interception, and this and that. Folks, the bottom line is the Lions got back to being who the Lions are. Last week, they threw the ball 55 times. I said that's not going to work. Today, Jared Goff threw the ball 23 times. The Lions ran the ball 43 times and passed it 23. That's how they're going to win. That's how this team has to win. And on the first drive of the game, Lions milk the clock. Lions use the clock. Lions go down the field 75 yards, and it's all David Montgomery. That's how you got to do it. Arizona was no match for what the Lions could do on the ground today. Montgomery finishes with 23 carries, 105 yards, his 12th 100-yard rushing game of his career, and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs averaged 5 a pop, 16 carries for 83 yards. And when the Lions needed it most, at the end of the game, to ice the game, they went to, as my buddy Chris Druin would say, Vanilla Vic. Jared Goff on a bootleg slides down for an 8-yard run and then a couple of knees, and the Lions win 20-13. But I liked the game plan.
The Minnesota Vikings may in fact be for real, as they dominated everyone's AFC darling in week 3. They beat down the Houston Texans. Our Locked On Sports Minnesota hosts are bullish about the rest of the season, and why wouldn't they be?
It's tough when you look at the rest of the schedule. Like the toughest games, like I said, when I did the Vikings predictions on Vikings.com, that's why I can't wait till the season ends. Because I think now they get to 12 wins. Like the wins we had them getting to 11 or 10, the 49ers and the Texans weren't it. I had them losing to both those teams. I had them beating the Giants. I had them beating the Jets, though. I do have them beating the Jets in London. And I had them beating the Packers because – are they at home or on the road for the Packers?
On the road in Lambeau next week.
Yep. So actually, no. Then I think I had them losing to the Packers on the road and then winning at home because I felt like – and this could be totally different now with injuries – but the Packers did win, so it's not over them. I felt like the Packers would have clinched maybe playoff contention, and they wouldn't care about that last Vikings game as much. And then 3 NFC North teams would get into the playoffs. I still think that might happen now, but I think it's going to be the Vikings first, then the Lions, then the Packers. So it's crazy how – but again, it's 3 games, so let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
Sam Darnold, and I'll talk about all that stuff later. But, yeah, no, you're right, Luke. When I look at the schedule – I don't know.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Top seed in the NFC right now, you guys. I'm looking at the playoff bracket. I'm trying to figure out who they're going to play after the bye week. It's fun times.
Yeah. I'm in Twins baseball playoff mode, checking those wild card standings. You're right, Sam. I think it's a lot funner to go check these Vikings playoff standings. Sam, my thing was kind of very similar to last week heading into that San Francisco game. My thing was like, okay, win or lose, just another great litmus test. Where are you among the league's best? Where do you kind of stack up in the NFL? Because we just didn't know this offseason. There's just so many questions, so many new faces. It all looks so different, and it was just kind of hard to get a real pulse on what this team was going to look like. The over-under win total in Vegas, I remember it was 7.5. Then it dropped to 6.5 the week leading up to week 1. So you stomped the Giants, didn't really move the needle that far as much as, kind of public perception goes. Then you beat San Francisco. It's like, okay, maybe we got something here. That's the NFC champions we just knocked off. Can you do it 2 weeks in a row versus really everybody's kind of sexy darling team in the AFC with this hotshot young quarterback named CJ Stroud? Just another great litmus test, I think, all in all, man. Second week in a row, they not only just went toe-to-toe with the league's best, they looked the part of the more dominating team for 60 full minutes. I just think when healthy, if healthy, which we'll get into some injuries in segment 2, these guys, this team should be competing every single week this season. So they just checked a lot of boxes in a lot of different departments again, Sam, for the 3rd week in a row. Well, what's the headline read tomorrow for you?
Yeah, love Trey's comment. No heart palpitations, no sweaty hands, no nervousness. That's 3 games in a row. If not for a garbage time field goal by San Francisco, you've won all 3 of these games by multiple possessions. You've won 2 of your 3 games by 20 points or more. You are dominating. And you could nitpick, certainly, like Sam Darnold shouldn't be flinging the ball recklessly a couple times a game, but hard to find a weakness right now. Your secondary has 2 weeks in a row shut down a loaded room of weapons. Your offense is super efficient. It can run the ball well. It can pass the ball effectively. It converts on 3rd down. Your kicker hasn't missed. He banged home a 58-yard field goal. Where's the weakness right now? We haven't seen it exposed yet. So maybe that's coming. Maybe there will be some adjustments against what the Vikings are doing defensively like we saw last year. That's reasonable to expect. We haven't seen a real weakness yet. Sam Darnold looks the part. He today I thought maybe didn't have his best game and still threw 4 touchdowns. Like if just an all-around effort. Defense rallies to the ball. There's not a discernible weakness the Vikings have for 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I will say probably their biggest strength, and we'll get into it. Not only, first of all, I got to say 6-0 lifetime versus the Texans now, by the way, but they forced CJ Stroud's first interception since like week 11, I want to say, versus the Cardinals last year on the opening drive too. Who would have thought? Who in the world would have thought this team would have started 3-0?
Stay up to date all year on the Minnesota Vikings and all things Minnesota sports by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Minnesota on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, there's only one word for what the Niners did on Sunday. The 49ers were missing 3 of their top playmakers, and yet they held a nice lead over the Rams. The Rams ended up kicking a last-second field goal to win. There's only one word on the minds of Locked On 49ers host Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker.
Collapse. That's the only word I can come up with. That's the title of this episode, Croc. The 49ers absolutely blew this one. They choked it away. They gave the game away to Los Angeles Rams in a game, Croc, that the Rams didn't have their first completed pass of the game until halfway through the second quarter. How do you lose a game like that? How do you let the Rams hang around and win it? Even into the fourth quarter, the 49ers should have been able to seal that victory, and they could not. Gave the Rams chance after chance, and then once again, within a minute of the fourth quarter, game tied, gave it back to them one more time and allowed the Rams to go down and kick a game-winning field goal.
You called it a collapse by the 49ers, and it was a collapse in all 3 phases of the game. It was a collapse by the offense, whether it was drop balls out there. It was a collapse by the special teams, missing a clutch field goal, as we've seen the 49ers do even last year, and then giving up a huge return on a punt, a collapse by them. And then defensively, a collapse down the stretch. Some things weren't going your way, and then you let the Rams capitalize on some big plays to be able to get back in this ball game, and not just get back, but put themselves in the position to potentially win this game. So
the true irony of this is in a game where you don't have Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings goes off. In a game where you don't have Christian McCaffrey, your run game just keeps on doing what the 49ers run game just always does. Jordan Mason averages over 4 yards a carry again in this one, over 130 yards on the ground. No, it was the 49ers defense, the thing that perfectly complemented this explosive and dynamic offense over the last few years, as this has been one of the best teams in the league. It was the defense that let them down. 13 fourth quarter Rams points, including a final drive that was set up by a special teams blunder. This is why when you have the opportunity, when you have a roster that is fat with talent on rookie contracts, especially, you have to hit that window, or the roster starts to deteriorate, the depth starts to go, your special teams maybe has some problems, your defense not quite as good, and all of a sudden you're giving up 27 points to the Rams without Puka Nacua, without Cooper Kupp, and you're losing a game where you had a double-digit lead. That's where the 49ers are right now. It's not a great place to be. And finally, things were dicey in Nashville after the Packers dominated the Titans. Fire alarms were going off during post-game interviews, including Packers head coach Matt LaFleur.
So really happy for our guys and proud of their effort.
You mentioned how we don't get it. I don't know. Keep going.
Whatever, keep going, keep firing away. They told me this city was going to burn if we came in here and won the game, so I guess it is.
If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will the Bengals finally win a game? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.